When I was invited to speak at this series, I had no idea what the series was about. I had no idea what the series was about until last night when I came and I heard what it is about. So I was thinking, what would be an interesting topic? And I thought, I would really wonder what would Patanjali say today? And I like challenges, obviously. So I thought, this is not so difficult. All I have to do is 3 things. I have to understand what was he thinking then, what was going on then. Then I have to understand what's going on now. And then I have to make an easy extrapolation of his thought from then to now. Well, let me tell you, that is very difficult. And as I was going along, I felt I am not really too capable in any of the 3 processes, but what I want to share with you is the result of how far I came in my understanding. So first of all, let me start with telling you my understanding of what Patanjali was thinking then. It is said, and I like that the entire teachings of yoga are summarized in the first 2 sutras. So that's easy. The first sutra goes, Atha Yoga Anushasanam. And it can be translated something like, now the induction or exposition in yoga begins. And I remember when I started studying with my yoga teacher, I thought, I'm ready to the next sutra. I don't see any point in this first sutra. It says, you're ready to go, I'm ready to go. Well, it took me a really long time to realize that the key word here is atha, and that means now. And now means that all of you is present fully, 100% at this moment. And then the next moment that comes, all of you, 100%, is present there. None of it is lingering from the moment before, and none of it is thinking about what was in the past and what's going to happen in the future. That in itself is very hard to achieve. So what it basically means is we are not ready to be open to the teachings of yoga. We are not ready to understand them, to receive them, until we are fully present at the moment. Now, the second sutra is Yoga Sutras Vritti Nirodha. That is a difficult sutra. It's sutra that each word has to be understood first on its own before you can get the understanding of the entire meaning. The translations have been done in a different ways. I think the one of the worst is used the most often, so I use it. Yoga means stopping of the modifications of the mind. Now, to explain that, what it means would take a long time. Plus, we would need to be present first in order to even attend that. So I'm not going to try. But I think what we can all agree is that yoga is here presented or set up as a mental discipline. It is stopping of the modifications of the mind. So it's mental discipline, which I think we would all agree that our current understanding is pretty much largely far from this understanding. People exercise yoga, which is a word that really tickles my throat in a wrong way, because how can you exercise yoga? The word to use is practice, and still under the practice we don't mean you stretch your limb to put it behind your neck, which is interesting, but you exercise your mind to put it in the right asana, in the right position. So I think we can say and all agree, or it would be good to proceed from this point if we all agree, despite what you think, is that Patanjali said that yoga is a mental discipline. So let's take that as the first step and proceed further. Now, if we say it's a mental discipline, we need to define what is a mind. And mind is defined as it is something that takes on the objects that is surrounded by. So in a way, you can imagine it. It's like a mirror that is reflecting the things that are in its view. Now, Jerry was talking about beautiful Prague. In Prague, we have, Prague is a funny city. It has a tower that pretends to be an Eiffel Tower, but of course it's not, because there's only one Eiffel Tower. But in that tower, there is something called lapidarium, which is a place where there is a maze with mirrors that don't reflect the objects the way they are. And this is exactly how our mind works, depending on which state it is in. So the mind can either be in a not pure, not authentic, not its own state, which means it's going to reflect the objects differently, versus it's going to give them different shape. It can make them look larger, more important, distort the picture. And I love going to the lapidarium and standing in front of the mirror that makes me look very tall and very thin. I love that distortion, that's my favorite. Some distortions are nice to have than others in life as well. So if the mind is just something that reflects the objects, then the question is, what is the real thing? And the answer Patanjali gives is meaning the real thing, meaning what is something that doesn't change, that stays the same, that stays the way it is. And Patanjali says it is the self. So in a way we can say that the yoga is a discipline of the self. Now, I'm not going to try to attempt to define what is the self. I will speak about what, according to Patanjali, are the obstacles in perceiving things properly. He says there are 5 obstacles, and they are really interesting. He calls them kleshas, which means like errors or problems. And the first one is pramana, which means right knowledge. This is very surprising because everybody tries to achieve right knowledge, and here we hear that the right knowledge is an obstacle to correct understanding. And it is because we have the tendency to identify with things. And when we identify with things, we become it. So if you have an idea about something and you believe this is the right knowledge, then you have the tendency to block out the other information because you set on in your understanding what's right, and therefore by default everything else is wrong. Second one is viparijaya, which is misconception. I think that doesn't need any explanation. Vikalpa, verbal delusion. Verbal delusion is something that's very common these days. You know, according to yoga, there are 3 kinds of speech. One that comes from your throat, and you can say anything. I love you, I hate you, you nice, you skinny, you fat, anything. It's just the sound of the vibration. The second speech comes from the heart, and that is more difficult to say anything because the heart gives it a vibration of emotion and experience, or should. Our understanding of heart is, what is heart, is changing as well, I noticed. So if you say something with a feeling, that feeling, or the feeling comes into what you're expressing, that feelings usually will tell what is your relationship to the thing you're speaking about. I give you an example. I'm a practitioner, so I talk to people. And somebody once said to me that actually I have become a practitioner, so I have a legal way of looking deeply into people. Might be some truth to it. I love looking into people. And what I love about people is that if you really watch carefully, they'll tell you everything about themselves without knowing. They just show everything, all the secrets out. So in this particular case, I remember asking somebody I was working with about a relationship, about a marriage, and I said, "How is your marriage?" And the answer was, "Fine." So, see, this is an expression of speech that comes from the heart, that is telling more than just the words, because if it was said from the throat, you would say fine. And you don't know if it's fine or not. Of course, if you're observing the person and they are saying fine, meaning don't you even ask any more questions about it, because I don't want to talk about it, because it's so fine that I don't want to say anything about it, then you would know that what is said and what is truly felt, in other words, if we speak about it energetically, vibration that is offered, that comes with the expression, is not exactly in line. The third kind of speech that is the most truthful is the belly speech. We always say we don't want people speaking with their belly, all the belly sounds. Well, this is not the belly sound saying you have eaten this wrong or that wrong. It is at the place in the middle of your abdomen, there is an energetic place where there is confluence of major energies. It's like a major highway conjunction energetically. And if you do something from that place, or if you feel something from that place and you express it, it has even deeper vibration. It has a support not only of your mind and of your heart, but it also has a support of the reality, the earth, the stability. It just has a different energy about it. So that's about verbal delusion. Now I start to think you analyzing what I am saying, what vibration does it have, if to trust it or not. So now I gave you a recipe how to go about it, so I have to lower my voice to sound more convincing. The fourth one is nidra, that means sleep. That means sleep as a way of you're not perceiving things. You are not able to perceive things because you are out. So your perception ability is not present. And the last one is smrtaya, which means memory. And memory, of course, brings us the conditioning by not in the present moment allowing us to perceive things purely, but conditioning them by previous experiences and expecting, if the experience was bad in the past, that now it's gonna not be so good, and vice versa. This happened to me. You know this works in your life, whether you're aware that this works or not. This happened to me last week. I am doing a series of talks about transformation, which is interesting because people say, we'd like you to come and talk about beautiful woman. And for example, and I say, well, I don't want to talk about beautiful woman. I want to talk about life and death and transformation, because I think that's more important these days. So I was at one of these places and they told me to park somewhere. And I did. It wasn't that easy because when I came there was no parking space. So I thought, they told me to park here, I don't know anything else, so I parked in the best way I could, but I have a long car, so it was sticking out, and I was nervous about it. I had a feeling this might not be good. Nobody parked like that, so I thought maybe if somebody comes out of the parking lot, he doesn't notice that my car is there. and when I come back, half of my car might not be there. So I wasn't comfortable. So I was waiting around thinking what to do, and then somebody came and took their car, made me a good parking spot, so I reparked. And then during the talk, people said, where are you parked? So I told them, and they said, at this hour, you can never find a parking spot. You understand? If I thought, and I knew, and I had the experience, in other words, the memory of that I can never park there, when I came there and there would be no parking spot, I would just leave and go look somewhere else. But because I had no previous experience, therefore I had no memory that would influence my experience, I expected you can park here. And that's what it ended up in the end. So it works always like that with us. And that's why all of these 5, and we're not in a classroom, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat them. Normally I would. I'm supposed to speak and you're supposed to listen, so I will just make it easy on you. That's why these 5 are described as being the obstacles to perceiving things with our mind properly, meaning in their pure state, in their state of as they are. Now, what it means basically is when we don't perceive things the way they are, we start to look at things as right or wrong. And the problem with that is that things that we see as wrong, we try to avoid, because when it's something wrong, we want to stay away from that. And something that we perceive right, we cling to. We have a tendency to be attracted to. And that's a binding tendency. And the binding tendency has a problem that the ego, lovely concept of ego, which I find is very misunderstood because people want to get rid of ego. If you don't know what ego is, you should never get rid of something you don't know what it is, right? Ego has its place, especially in the organization in the body. The concept of ahamkar, the I and identification, determines and says, for example, where I start and where I end, where things belong, what is their place within the order. And I will propose you here a strange thought, actually, that I strongly believe in, and as the time goes on, I like and see helpful and actually important more and more. And that is that in yoga you have to become quite egoistic, quite selfish, quite focused on the thing that has to become the most important for you in life is to have the pure state of mind at all circumstances. That is an incredible focused determination that in a way is focusing on self. And as Patanjali says later on, and I will get to that quickly, is mind can only focus at the moment on one object at one moment. Therefore, it is of crucial importance that you choose the right object. Because if you choose the wrong object at that moment, that's it. You don't have any other choice. Luckily, the next moment comes and you can make a different choice. So, because of this tendency of the mind to color things, we need to learn to uncolor. To, in other words, to control it, to learn how it works, and to make it work properly, or create circumstances that help it to make it work properly. So how it's done, good teachers are very instructive, and Patanjali was an excellent teacher. Actually, somebody told me that you recognize a good teacher by telling you the same thing 3 different or 4 different ways. And when my daughter was little, she unknowingly knew this, And she would always tell me, please don't say that again another way, I got it, even if she didn't get it, because she hated to hear it for the fourth, fifth time. Or it can be this way, or it can be that way. Did you get that? Or if you didn't get that, it can be that way. So Patanjali was a very generous teacher. He understood the workings of the mind phenomenally. So he knew what to expect, all the problems and obstacles coming from people in their understanding. So with the exposition of problem, he also gave a solution ahead of time. He didn't wait until people say, so how do we go about this? He was such an excellent teacher that he knew what people are going to be thinking, and he gave them the answer before they asked the question, which is a brilliance. A little bit different brilliance than, no, that's a political comment, I won't make that. So how do we control the mind? The sutra is abhyasa, vairagyabhyam, tan nirodha. There you hear that same word nirodha, which means to stop, not to continue. And the two key words are abhyasa and vairagya. And abhyasa is the one you want to have, you want to cling to. It means focused effort or practice, or effort that leads to the result of which is that the mind is controlled, it's pure, and such mind can reflect things as they are. And at some point, after a while, the mind has no objects to reflect. It only reflects itself and realizes that mind is the self. It's the extension of the source, which is a 7 degrees of Samadhi, also described in this text. So when Patanjali says abhyasa, focused effort or practice, he also defines what it is, because for many people focused practice is here and there, 10 minutes, once in a while when I have time, oh, I'd like to but I can't. So he qualifies it. He says it's focused practice means you practice for a long time, which means you have to have a patience and perseverance. We are used to looking into immediately what we get as a result of our efforts. Here, Patanjali says you're going to practice for a long time with full focus, without break, and with full determination. Meaning you're not going to look at the results. And you know, yoga is described in different ways, and one of the ways is described, and this is true, that it's an obstacle race. That is basically helping you to navigate through obstacles. And our human condition is set up so beautifully in paradox that there are plenty of obstacles. The basic fundamental is, for example, the immortal, infinite spirit in the quite mortal, not infinite at all physical body. That's a delicious paradox to start with. Rational mind that justifies everything and that recognizes the existence only of things that it can see and touch, nama rupa, versus the inner mind that works quite differently, that works through perceptions, through feelings, and I don't mean a feeling like, oh, I'm happy and oh, I'm sad. I mean a feeling of feeling the vibration, the energetic essence and existence of things. So this time of practice is yogic practice. I don't know too many people who have the courage, the patience, the faith, the determination to go like this, because when don't get the results they think they should get. And you know, I ask people, this is one of my questions, and it's interesting to get the answers. I ask, what is their spiritual practice and what are the results? And it's interesting, some people tell me their spiritual practice is crossword puzzles, which is incredible. Other people tell you they are part of some tradition, spiritual tradition, maybe for 20 years, which is a substantial amount of time because human life is pretty short. And when you ask them about their progress or their results, they say, well, not much. That's not right. We either don't do the practice in the right way, or we're not looking at how to view where we're progressing. But there are clear signs of a progress. One can tell when one is on the spiritual path, which is really just the path of self-understanding, the self with the capital S. So I think it's also important to mention these because in any effort that we put, it brings it sets things in motion by law of karma, and it brings some fruits. So it is important, as my yoga teacher used to say. She said, you need to make sure that you're sitting on the right train. In other words, that you're going in the right direction. And when you're not sure, it's okay to get out at a station, sit for a while, and just not to travel anywhere, and just see, just to look around. Look around means look within yourself around, and make sure you get the understanding of where you are and where you need to go. And so the second word, vairagya, that's really important, and that ties very closely in with this, is it means non-attachment, non-identification, non-reaction. Practically, we can translate this into no expectations. Now, tell me honestly, would you practice something with your full heart for the rest of your life, with the full determination, full faith, with no expectation? If you admit to that, you're very advanced spiritually. But this is how it is, meaning the expectation, you cannot have an expectation to a fixed result. You cannot go and sit on a yoga mat, for example, and meditate, whatever that is for many people, and then do it because you expect, and you do it for the sole purpose of having a certain result. That is a business contract. That's not a spiritual practice. But if you sit and keep things open, and you open to whatever it comes, and you stay focused on your practice, and you don't make judgments whether you're doing good or bad, which is really important, that you don't make judgments about either of the part, because many people make the judgments about the bad part, but when it's going good, they get attached to that. And it's really lovely, this part, because it speaks quite often on the spiritual path about another relationship that we have, not only with the self, but with the extended part of the self, with the source, which many call God, so I will, for the sake of understanding, call that as well. And the relationship is really quite unbalanced in a way that when things are good, people say, I did well. And when things go bad, they say, God, why you punishing me? Why, what am I doing wrong? Why are you not giving me, where's the mistake? So we got to decide whether we are the ones who are responsible for everything, or we let the source to be responsible for everything, because it cannot be both ways. So it's really important that we get some clarity about that. So in order for us to do this practice, we also, of course, have to develop a strong sense of self, because the self is going to be the one who is going to be watching without judgment, and seeing and perceiving what's happening. I can say the whole thing. This is a pretty heavy-duty stuff, isn't it, for an understanding? So let me try to say it in a sake of lunchtime, which I would like to point out that what we're doing here is purely non-Ayurvedic, speaking about heavy philosophy at lunchtime, when your belly is saying, I don't care, I just want a good lunch. So we're feeding here our mental Agni, our mental fire, Buddhi, instead of feeding our belly, Chatara Agni. So let us be for once forgiven. But it's a split, of course. So it's not a pure healthy situation. So another way I can try to say this complicated thing is, first of all, we need to understand the nature of things, very simply, which means nature of ourselves, who we are. Ayurveda and yoga are excellent disciplines for this. How things work, what they need to work properly. Then we need to understand how to control that nature, because we are going to learn as we discover the nature of things, that some things have the tendency to cause troubles, and some things have the tendency to bring ease. So that's a natural phenomenon. So once we learn what things are and how to control them, then we need to master the control. And then comes the toughest part. Then we need to forget everything and put it aside. Which is very difficult, because we have a tendency to get attached to our efforts and cling to them. And so it's not so natural to put lots of effort into something and then leave it behind. But the best explanation I heard for this was, it's like the practices are like a ladder helping you to get on the roof, and once you get on the roof, you don't need to drag the ladder there. It was just helping you to get there. I think Dalai Lama says this very nicely. He says, in order for you to break the rule, you have to master it first. You have to know things absolutely perfectly. And I would just add to that the very old known adage, you cannot transform something you have not fully experienced. So we have to get the full experience first before we can go beyond that. So how do we do that? Patanjali again says there are 5 requirements. First is Shraddha, which means faith. And you know, faith is an interesting thing. Faith is something else than hope. Faith means you are unequivocally sure of a certain outcome at a situation when nothing points to the likelihood that it is going to happen. That's faith. The second is virya, which means strength. Obviously, this is not a path for faint-hearted. I always say to be a full human being requires huge balls, meaning lots of courage and strength, because it's not an easy task to navigate through the paradox situation. The third one is interesting because it's smrti, and you already heard that word. That means memory. Remember, we were saying memory is an obstacle, and now we're saying memory is a good thing, it's a requirement. So my understanding of this is here, why is it presented as a good thing, as a requirement actually, to be able to walk on a path of self-discovery, self-understanding, is to err is human, but to repeat the same error is foolish. And the best explanation of this point I heard from Robert Svoboda, who is a great knower of Vedas, and he lives them in his own way as well. And he used famous person Elizabeth Taylor and her relationship to marriages to explain this. He said, first marriage doesn't work out. Sure, it happens to lots of people. Second marriage, it's gonna be better this time. Third marriage to the same person I got married first time, why not? It might work out this time. Fourth marriage, let's have faith. It can happen. But fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, and 11th, that's silly. Here it means you need to have a memory of things that did not work, and it's a good thing that you have that memory, because then you choose not to do it again. Huh? Obviously, she didn't know this one. I think she rather enjoyed the process. Next is Samadhi, which means contemplative mind. We talked about it yesterday. It means that your mind has to be in a quiet state to be able to perceive how things are. It has to be turned inwardly. It cannot be clogged by too many impressions. It's like a computer. Huh? If the computer is crunching the data, it's not available to do anything. It's occupied, it's busy, its capacity is full. So it's the same with the mind. Mind has to be quiet, empty, to be able to perceive things as they are. And the last one that comes out of that contemplation naturally is prajna purvaka, which means the ability to discern between what is real and what is not real. And here is meant to discern that the real is the self, the invisible, and the non-real is prakriti, which is everything that is manifested. Now, of course, obviously, to reach this state of the mind is not easy. If it was so easy, we all would be there. And I have no doubt that you are not there, I am not there. So for me, it's not easy. And Patanjali says the reasons are tamasic state of mind, and I would add to it, of course, rajasic state of mind. Does everybody know here what tamas and rajas is? Is there somebody who doesn't? Good. Okay. The best explanation I have heard is that rajas is a tendency to act when action is not required. And tamas is a tendency to not act when action is required. So it's a clear and beautiful definition. How do we do this? It's not easy. So again, as a good teacher, he in famed sutra number 33 gives some practical advice. First of all, he gives an advice how to behave in social interactions, which is really interesting and very practical for today. He gives 4 keys and locks, so corresponding things, how to behave towards people that you encounter in your life. And the first group of people, sukha people, are the happy people. They are easy ones. You don't need any secret password for them. It's nice and easy to be with happy people. He says just be friendly with them because you benefit from their company. That's dukkha people, unhappy people. He says compassion is the right approach. Now, that word is not, again, understood well. It actually means with passion, with your fire of understanding. Okay? It doesn't mean you tell the people let me tell you how to become happy. Let me change you. Let me explain what you're doing wrong. And because I love you, brother, if you do what I tell you, you're going to be happy again. We don't practice that often enough. So the third category is a group of punya people. These are blessed people, in other words. People who have more merit than just being happy, because you know you can also be happy and unaware. Actually, I'd say in a certain state of being, you more happy being unaware than if you become aware. So blessed ignorance has its place in life. So to punya people, you respond with delight. Obviously, you are delighted that somebody has reached a more happy, blessed state than you are in. It's your inspiration, it's your hope. It can happen. If somebody else achieved that, it can happen for you too. Wonderful. You are very delighted rather than jealous. And now comes the last category, the one that's increasing these days, apunya, which means people that are not blessed, that have chosen or not chosen, but for whatever reason are more in a state of not seeing things as they are, and with force accepting that as a reality, than seeing things as they are. And the key to that is, interestingly enough, indifference. Why? Because mind reflects the objects with which it occupies itself. So, if you occupy yourself with unwanted objects, you're going to strengthen that unwantedness. Mother Teresa has never worked against poverty. She has worked to take care of people in need. Why? I do believe because it made her feel good. For the selfish reason. It was something that resonated with her. And I have seen all the people that have been example of this living. They have not done it to change the world. They have done it because they felt a need, an opportunity, and they just lived what they felt they could. So this actually, believe it or not, is the first part. There are 3 parts to the talk, so don't despair, I'll shorten it up. Because the first part is heavy-duty part, and I have just mentioned few teachings of Patanjali that I considered the key. Obviously, the whole teachings are very evolved, very complex, very deep. It's a lifetime study, actually. It's a good study, so I strongly recommend that in between watching the television, you squeeze in some time with Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And hopefully, if you read well, it should lead you to turning off the television. So the second part is, what is the current state? And I don't think it's necessary to deliberate on that, other than just make very few points from the view of Patanjali. My thinking was, if Patanjali was here today, how he would view things, what he would think, how he would make his judgment, what is going on, how do we live. So I think since his teachings were heavily about mind, he would look at the state of the mind, the current affairs, mental affairs. And I think what he would say, first of all, he would notice very clearly is that our minds are not focused. And for him, and I forgot to say that because I got carried away with check test, because my mind is not so developed that I can fully ignore it, especially in this situation. And there's going something else on, they're cleaning the window, so it's an incredible world of distractions we live in. What he was saying is the key to achieving this mind is that you focus at one thing at the moment. And I need to finish this thought up because it's really important. And so obviously we all can feel already that it's important what object it is. Because if you, for example, focus on a monkey for long enough, you start to behave like a monkey. So it's important. And what he said was, it should be either focusing on your breath through the path of pranayama, which means not controlling the breath but expanding the life of the breath, which is the nature of breath actually, to expand. So that would be one way, because that's an indirect way how to control mind. Excellent way, important way. Second possible way would be focusing on subtle sensory perceptions, because we have touched on that senses have really an important role. This is the limb, forgotten limb of Ashtanga path, Pratyahara. That is really important. The next one is focus on light within. Apparently there is light within. That is good to focus on. Or focus on a great soul's mind, or on the experience of peace that we experience in deep sleep, but of course in the awake state we don't remember it. Or, and I love this, on anything, just focus on anything that lifts the mind, lifts it into a proper vibration. This is the most open, liberal, accepting spiritual path I have ever encountered, because it says anything that pleases you within your true self is your God. Anything. So with that in mind, I think the first thing he would say is, you don't focus your mind on one thing at a time. People, what do? We drive and talk on a phone or to ourselves, or listen to music. We run and listen to music. Somebody asked me many years ago if I pump a breast milk while I drive, and I tell you, I was really surprised by that question, because I saw people on their morning commute to do just about anything, to get dressed, to put makeup, to eat, to do jobs, chores and everything. But apparently you can also do good to your child by pumping your breast milk while you drive, if you want to multitask. So we do this constantly, and of course in Ayurveda we have a very specific opinion. There's shloka that says, if you eat standing up, death is looking over your shoulder. There is of course no shloka what happens if you eat walking. I think they consider you already dead because you are standing up eating, so this is beyond. So we do this constantly, which means two things. It means it leaves our mind turned outwardly and overloaded with sensory impressions. So when that happens, it cannot go inwardly and get into its own state. So we're losing lots of valuable energy, which we call prana. That's why the most common disease these days is fatigue. And people don't have life energy to live, because obviously we used it on these tasks because we don't know how. And if we do know how, it's not easy to practice. We already know why. So when a mind is in such a state, it's incapable of perceiving things as they are. It cannot be sattvic. It cannot purely reflect things as they are. So we're responding to things when we don't have to. We don't respond when we need to. Rajas, tamas. And to complicate the situation even more, there is no consensus on what reality is these days, is there? Huh? There are so many diverse, conflicting opinions about everything. Because mind has a wonderful ability, it can justify anything. Huh? If you think about corruption, I always say mind is the most corrupted agent in this universe, because it can come up with justification for about anything. I mean, the outside rational mind. So people, for example, in the good efforts of trying to find a way in a simple thing like what to eat, and I always thank God the animals have not got onto this. Have you ever seen a cat or dog standing over their bowl and thinking, I shouldn't eat that, I'm too fat? Never happens. So what we have done in our effort of understand things better, we have made them more complicated because we haven't used the right tool, the right mind, and that's the inner mind. So I think what he would say is we need to change the mind, how it works. And of course we have had those 5 requirements. Again, I'm not going to ask you what they were, but if you wish, you can see how, for example, Shraddha has changed into doubt and fear, and that's the basic force that's working, especially if you follow public opinion. Virya, strengths have turned into lack of power, disempowerment, dis-ease, lack of ease, lack of energy, and so on. So, change our mind first and foremost. I was trying to think, yes, I know it's getting very long and I myself am ready to close. So the last part is, what advice would give us Patanjali? That's the extrapolation of his thoughts from then to now. So I have come up with 5 advices, and Spirit of Patanjali, please forgive me. So this is what I think he would say. Number 1 is realize that you, the I, the self, is only an extension, a fragment of universal consciousness, and seek that connection. That's huge, how profound it is. That in itself can be it. Now, how to go there, because it's a teacher, so he gives instruction, would be choose the path that resonates with you. We have said that there is such diversity. It's not about which is the right path, it's the path that resonates with you. And honestly, I admire people who attempt to live consciously or reasonably in these days without some proper guidance. There are, of course, people who have their inner navigational system, their inner GPS, so to speak, very developed naturally. They don't need to seek any system. But if you watch them, you realize that what they live, what they practice, is actually the old, wise, ancient wisdom and guidance. So once you find a system, stay with it. Don't change the system. Just because somebody else told you, oh, I went to this path and this gives you something else. If you're happy with your system, stay with it. Because only then you can go deep and you can work consistently and realize that the changes that are going to be going on are many times not visible, but they are going on. Not just like spring is ever hear anybody who in the winter says, look at the state of the trees, they are never going to get leaves. Huh? No, somehow we believe, and it happens every year, that the order of the nature comes, and although the whole winter the changes are not visible, all of a sudden then they become visible. It's the same with us on the spiritual path. And luckily, I always am grateful that the nature doesn't exercise too much the right for free will. Just picture what would happen if the tree in the fall, for example, would say, I'm tired of every year letting the leaves down. This year I'm going to keep them. Or if a squirrel would say, I'm tired of being squirrel, that's not sexy enough, I want a promotion, I want to be a hawk or something else. Everything has its place and its order, and we are part of that order. So it's not really discovering new system, it is discovering how are we part of the system that already exists. Now, the third one, I think, would be, the question is, okay, so we have decided to do this, we practice, how do we know we're on the right path? So, all correct practices, all the right practices lead to quiet mind, open heart, and simple, uncomplicated living. That's the result of them. There's the practical part, there is the mental part, and there is the feeling part. And the qualities that naturally come are grace, because order is beauty and grace. Gratitude and humility. It's not something you can try to develop. I'm going to try to be humble because I'm such a bastard and I heard that's a good thing. That doesn't work. It's a byproduct of certain way of living. And remember the loaded word love. I think the best Swami Satchidananda, for me, said, love is the oil that greases the wheel of your life so it doesn't squeak so bad. And it softens things, and it's true. So that comes in that state of being present in the moment, living in a free-flowing, open way. The fourth sign to look at is, as your calmness increases, your contentment increases as well, interestingly enough, naturally. And also what happens, your dependency and your focus on the outside world naturally lessens. You naturally are drawn to go inwardly. And then what happens is life becomes from outer rational mind guided to inner mind or spirit guided. And that's really what we want. And when that happens, I think we come to a state when we realize that everything is available. We don't need to try for anything. We just need to allow. Get in a state when we allow for things to be. So let me close with wise words for me of Saint Jnaneshwar that I like very much. And that is his quote that goes like this: there is neither bondage nor freedom. There is nothing to be accomplished. There is only the pleasure of expounding. So I don't see any better way closing this interestingly distracting and destructing, hopefully not destructing all of us, sharing with these words, offering them to our minds, and with a hope and wish that we live in such a place of mind that the pleasure of expounding, discovering everything in its pure state, becomes again our nature. Namaskar. So does anybody has any strengths for questions? If not, I fully understand it's time for lunch, but you have a question. Go ahead.
You were just mentioning about, I just wanted to shloka about when you eat, because I usually tell it to people, but I wanted to know the source. Like when you eat standing, then you said that how to...
I think it's in Ashtanga Hridayam.
Ashtanga Hridayam?
Yeah.
Do you know these shlokas?
No, I don't know exactly where, but I think it can be found out. Okay. And why I think it's Ashtanga, because he was the GP, general practitioner. He was the practical guy, so he always was talking about things in a very practical way.
Do you believe that yoga is related to neuroplasticity?
That yoga is a way to...
Is related to neuroplasticity in any way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The potential, you know, for example, take Yoga Nidra as a technique. Huh? Yoga Nidra is a technique that knows how to tap into the part of the brain that we know, we think, in modern medicine, that we don't use. And if you look at a construction of a human body, you realize that nothing is there as a extra surplus, as a waste. Take, for example, female ovum. How many are formed? When a girl is born, she is born with about 400,000 eggs. But during her lifetime, matures 400 of them. And out of it comes one child, 2, 3 maximum. So that would be such an overproduction, you know, if you think of it. Why would we be given a capacity 400,000 to 1 or 2 or 3? So there must be a different role for that. Not only, it's not happening only to produce children. The same must be with the matter of the brain, that we say we use 3% if somebody is genius, 5%. So is 95% laying there for nothing? I don't believe so. You know, as a reserve, if the 1% of your 3% goes bad, you call on a reserve. A human body is not constructed in that way, so it doesn't make any sense. So what it means is, most likely we either use it and we don't know about it, we don't know about a way how we're using it, and we don't measure that yet, we don't see it, or we need to find a special pathway, special ways how to be using it consciously.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a text you recommend that would be the best way to connect this the great amount of information you guys have in Ayurveda and Patanjali? I know you did a lot of research. Is there something that you
Are you talking how to connect Ayurveda with Patanjali?
Yes.
That has never been done until now.
Brilliant. And is there a text on Ayurveda you recommend as a place to?
There are many texts, and as many there are authors. You have to find a style that resonates with you. You know, there are some very encyclopedic type scholarly texts which have appeal and place sometimes. There are more softer texts that say that more like a story, they are more practical. So there are so many authors that I think you really need to find your own one.
Do you hand any books to your patients?
I don't hand any books to my patients, no. You mean other than my own? No, I'm kidding. No. I don't hand any patients to them.
You certainly give them a letter on Ayurveda journal.
It's in English and we speak Czech, so I make sure they live Ayurveda. Is that good enough? I think so.
Sound? Am I getting sound? Is this...
Yes, you're getting sound, so you watch what you say, Jerry. So anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
I have just one small observation. It's not a question, but clarification. One of the 5 principles of Patanjali, first one you mentioned, Shraddha. Shraddha means you explained faith, but Shraddha, what I remember is Shraddha means dedication.
Dedication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bhakti means devotion, Shraddha means dedication.
Yeah.
Faith is totally a different construct. Viswas is faith. Shraddha and faith are two different things. How did you have connection of these two?
For me, it's how you define the word. For me, to have a dedication for something, I have to have faith in it. I'm not going to dedicate to something I don't believe in. So for me, it's one and the same thing.
No, faith is the antecedent and dedication is the consequence.
You can say that
Yeah.
that way as well.
The
It's
Shraddha,
fine.
I could be wrong, you know.
No. You're right.
And secondly, you said that we are guided by the inner navigation system, GPS,
Mhm.
and don't change it. If it is so, then what happens if that GPS is wrong, inherently wrong, with the wrong chip?
You know,
Suppose I am on the wrong path. For this example, the terrorists and all this, they have a wrong system. So unless how we know that it's right or wrong unless we are told by somebody else?
I have never seen in working with more than 10,000 people that there would be one single person who would not know deep in their heart and in their soul what is right and what is wrong. I've never seen that, never. What I have seen is that people are not sure because if they followed that guidance, it would make severe consequences in their life, and therefore they are not open to read that easily, that openly. So I have not seen a single person truly, when they drop inside and are connected with the self, that the navigation system would be wrong.
How we know that they may be innocent, they may be ignorant about this, but how we know about it?
Every person knows for themselves. That's my experience, and I can only share my experience. That's all I have.
I know yesterday you avoided the question of God. There is a concept of Ishvara. I know you did not mention this in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. You want to comment on as to what that connection is with God, Ishvara versus God?
I think the only way at the moment I would feel comfortable answering is one mentor. It was a guru of Dr. Robert Svoboda, said once that Ishta Devata is that you're going to think about as the last thing when you're drowning. And to me that's a pretty good direction. Are you going to think about you haven't worked hard enough? Are you going to think about that you haven't paid your bills? Are you going to think about that you haven't watched enough of sunsets? That you haven't hugged yourself and your loved ones enough? I think I'm of course crazy enough to try anything, but I've decided I'm not going to go try to drown myself to test what am I going to think about, because I think you cannot test this. It's the authentic situation. But to me it narrows things down pretty much about the concept of what God is for each of us, which is a different thing than what God is. What God is for each of us at state, when we still speak about it, is a different thing than what God is then is. But when we know, we don't speak about it because it's unspeakable.
The reason I ask this question because there is always controversy about yoga versus religion. And so it may not be, when there are people of religion who feel that yoga is threat.
They have the right to their mindset.
Thank you.
The byproduct of living yogically is tolerance. I have seen people who truly lived and embrace the yogic pathway of being tolerant. And to me, that's the right fruit that tells you what we're really talking about. And then I don't care if it's called religion or what it is called, as long as it brings tolerance, it's the right thing. Those are not easy questions. I went a long way to get difficult questions.
Wait till part 3.
You had a question. Okay.
I would like to know if you have a particular translation of Patanjali that you choose.
There are a couple of favorite ones. It's like with the books. Huh? Everybody has their own interpretation, and it's all about the commentary. My personal commentaries are, I like Georg Florenstein. He was the first one who really brought the Vedic thought with a lot of deep understanding and humility and love to the West. But the one I really sleep on, if you wish, or have under my pillow, is Swami Satchidananda. That's a love affair.
So I think we're running out of time. If anybody needs to have another question, perhaps after we close. But in closing, I want to thank a couple of people. First of all, the food today, these wonderful samosas, are supplied courtesy of Ayurveda Restaurant on State Road. And secondly, the pizzas that we had last night were supplied by Ishwar Patel of Dartmouth Motor Inn, also on State Road, who are supporting our Patanjali lecture series with their wonderful contributions. And finally, but not least, I want to offer a small gift for our speaker, a little token of our thanks for you coming all this way and giving us such a wonderful talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I guess it must be pizza and samosas inside, so I'm happy. Thank you.
And thank you all for coming, and see you next year.